Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Friday edition of Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. I'm Pastor Mark Baze, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Hopefully you had a good time with us yesterday discussing theology questions on Theology Thursday. We do have a carryover from yesterday. A good friend of ours, Robert, who sent in a question about my position on Genesis and the gap theory, and I'll get to that. But before we do that, I do want to cover a few things, then we'll finish up with the theological side of things. How does that sound? So, first and foremost, tomorrow is Saturday. I always start that way. What I mean is Sunday is going to be, I think, a full day of broadcasting, a normal schedule. So we will have Sunday school. Deceived, has Christianity become a cult? Fear tactics will be what we're covering. Hosea chapter 12, we're going to knock out the whole 12th chapter of Hosea, giving us only 2 chapters left. Hosea will be done soon, and then I'll have to figure out where we go from there, because apparently there's some preachers the Lord reveals to them what they are to preach, but I have to study and decide what to do. And then Sunday night, we'll continue our commonly misunderstood Bible teachings. And I'm not quite sure what we're going to cover there yet. I'm still worried about Sunday school. I kind of just have to take it one step at a time. But it'll be a good time. 4 live streams all on Sunday not 4 live streams, 3 live streams all on Sunday for your entertainment, edification, learning, hopefully all those things. If you disagree with me, maybe it'll just get you fired up and riled up. Now, with that in mind, I don't think I have any other major announcements concerning Sunday, which means it's time to just go ahead and get straight into the show. Right now, Trump is in office, and you will recall the last time, because this is still technically Trump's first year in office, the last time Trump was in office was, the last full year was 2020. And, the summer of love. And so typically what happens when leftists don't get their way, they tend to start rioting. Well, Trump is in office again. The leftists are not getting their way, and they're starting to riot. And sadly, it's led to the death of one woman. Here's from Breitbart, which you can find on a number of news stations. ICE agent fatally shoots woman who allegedly weaponized her vehicle. And we're going to see how all this plays out. Will there be a trial and whatnot? I have watched the video. It's always a sad thing when you hear of anyone being killed, and all the more sad and disturbing when you watch a video in which somebody dies. So we'll discuss this matter of, was this a justified shooting? What was the woman doing leading up to her being shot by an ICE agent? I think there's a lot of interesting things that are being revealed about all of this. Of course, Trump and Kristi Noem and so on, they organized ICE to go into Minneapolis, carrying out matters of arresting illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, deporting them, right? So many of them are in the country illegally, and a lot of them are criminals. Actually, all of them are criminals, because if you enter the country illegally, that is breaking a crime. It's a federal crime. And so there was a woman who was in a car in the middle of the street, and when you watch the video, you can watch the video yourself if you would like. I'm not going to play the video for you, but here's a clip, or I'm not going to play it, but just a clip from the video, Fox News reporting on it. A woman is in the middle of the road. ICE officers approach. The car begins to move, and then an ICE agent shoots into the car, hitting the woman, killing her, and everybody is now having this great debate, right? What happened? Who's justified? So with all of that in mind, I don't know if you have seen the reporting on it, if you have seen the video, but it has led to a massive stir. There is a lot of protesting going on. Whether it's in Minneapolis. Why is it always Minneapolis? Like every time, right? George Floyd, so on. why cannot Minnesota just kind of get it together, right? Can you keep it together just a little bit? But lots of protesting going on there. Of course, Portland, Oregon. Alan, thinking of you. I don't know if you're watching right now, but our friends over there on the West Coast. And I'm sure it's going on in a number of other places. Here's my opinion. After watching the video, I think, based on all the available evidence that I've seen, you cannot disprove that the agent was in fear for his life. You can't disprove that. When the woman, first of all, it has been reported, and you get on X and see people saying all sorts of things. She was just trying to make a U-turn, or she was letting people by. She wasn't trying to do anything to obstruct the ICE agents. That's absolutely not the case. Even witnesses there who saw the thing said yes, she was working to obstruct law enforcement. Furthermore, this woman has some confused. Sadly, I have to say had in the past tense. Sadly, she had a lot of confusion about morality and God's order of creation. She was engaged in a relationship with a woman, and the woman with whom she was in a relationship with, even she knew that that this woman was carrying out interference to prevent ICE from doing what they were sent to do. Now, when you watch the video, and there's other places you can go, I don't know what YouTube allows, so I'm not going to start showing footage just in case. And you don't really have to see it because it's available for you, and regardless. When she is approached by the ICE agents because she is obstructing them, she begins to move her car. And her initial movements are actually towards an ICE agent who is in the front. Now, one of the angles that's being played a lot is a view from the back. So you see the back of the car going forward. What you do not see is the angle that another video shows, which is the front, in which she very much does make contact with an ICE agent with the hood of her vehicle. And there was ICE on the road, and at the time, the wheels were angled towards the ICE agent as she started moving forward. From the time that she hits the ICE agent to then when she starts to change the direction of the wheels, we're talking a very short amount of time. I mean, less than a second from the looks of the video. And so, what I think people fail to realize, if they have never been in, whether it is sports, if they've never been in any kind of physical altercation, or even just in life in general, things happen very fast and you have to process information. The time it takes for a human to perceive something and react to it is around a quarter of a second, right? To perceive and react to it. That is under ideal circumstances, that you fully realize exactly what is happening. That is not factoring in, hey, a car just ran into you, knocking you off balance. Okay? So with that in mind, this officer had really less than a second to react to the woman hitting him, and then him needing to decide, is my life in danger? Should I employ lethal force? And that's what he did. All the people saying she wasn't armed, they don't understand the concept of being armed. You see, just because you don't have a firearm does not mean you are not armed. A vehicle absolutely can be used as a lethal weapon. Absolutely it can. So she was armed, and she presented a threat. At least that's the argument, and I think the video evidence shows that she presented a threat to the officer and the life of the officer. And so all of that in mind, here's another thing for you. This very same ICE agent, I can't remember what the time span was. If we go, let me see, I think Daily Wire has an article on it. This very same ICE agent has been involved previously with someone using their vehicle as a threat. And I believe I saw it and I should have saved it, but I didn't. That is my fault. I do apologize. But I wanted to see if I could show it to you really quick. And it may not have been on the Daily Wire. It may have been on Breitbart. And so I will, if I can't find it very soon, I'll just move on and let you go look it up yourself, because it absolutely is a fact. As far as I know, there has not been any change to the report on this. But this agent had previously been involved, once again, with a dangerous situation in which there was someone using their vehicle to ram into him. And so let me see. It may have been on Breitbart. I can't recall. And once again, as always, if there's any reason to redact that, then of course I will admit it. But at this time, I do not believe that there has been any redaction to that. So this is so this is reporting as of yesterday. And so Breitbart has a lot of ads, and I'm not willing to do whatever it takes to get rid of the ads, so I apologize. It says, but here's the initial one. ICE agent involved in Minneapolis shooting was dragged by illegal driver, hospitalized last year. Okay, now that's ICE agent involved. Maybe that doesn't mean the actual ICE agent, but the article reads, the ICE agent who was involved in the shooting of the Minneapolis anti-ICE activists on Wednesday was seriously injured by an illegal migrant driver last year, according to a report. The agent, whose name is being withheld, was dragged at least 50 yards by the migrant driver and put in the hospital after the officer conducted a traffic stop last June, according to a DHS press release from last year. The officer was injured on June 17th in Bloomington, Minnesota. The migrant perpetrator, identified as Mexican native Roberto Carlos I don't know how you say it in Spanish, Munoz, Guatemala, reportedly refused to exit his vehicle and dragged the officer after the agent put his arm inside the vehicle. Munoz had a long rap sheet with charges including domestic assault and sex crimes against a teen. So, with that being said, this officer has been injured in somebody fleeing before, okay? I think that this is going to be used, because George Floyd was used by the left as a martyr, as a victim. And so they will continue to use the case of this woman who sadly lost her life. We can be sad that she lost her life, and at the same time, was the officer justified? I see no evidence to the contrary at this point. And so with that in mind, the left will probably use it. Just get ready. It may only get more violent. There may be more protests. And this just goes to show you, I think, the attitude of the left. They will put on a nice face maybe sometimes during election season. Remember when Kamala Harris was running and everybody was happy and we were clapping hands and yes, yeah, you go girl kind of mentality. But at the end of the day, when the left doesn't get what they want, because they believe that Trump is evil, you are evil, anything goes. You are justified. And so with that in mind, this also is just a simple matter of if you go against law enforcement, if you go against a federal agent, you need to realize that you are taking your life into your own hands. Now, I'm not saying that it's never justified to stand up to government. Our nation was built upon the principles of standing up to government. Now, our nation was not founded under the basis of I'm going to obstruct law enforcement because I want illegals, criminals to be able to just live in our country without any consequences and whatnot. But all the same, right? The idea of resisting the federal government is not something I believe should never happen. We've talked before on this show about the atrocities, I believe, that have been committed by the ATF. Whether it's Ruby Ridge, lots of interesting questions about Waco. I know the narrative, I know the story often told, but regardless, right? Ruby Ridge is a primary example, but other people as well. A lot of questions surrounding, the ATF carrying out raids, and there's other departments as well, not just to mention the ATF. But the point is, do not defy the federal government and expect zero consequences. That is one of the most telling things to me. The mentality of, oh my goodness, right? They're shocked. They're horrified that this woman who was obstructing federal agents and then, from the video evidence, presented a real threat with her vehicle. They are shocked that there were any consequences that resulted from it. And that may be from our culture as well, this idea of zero consequences. Hey, you turned in an assignment late in school. Don't worry about it. The teachers aren't allowed to give zeros because that hurts the, the funding that the school receives or what have you. There's all these incentives, right, to not give consequences and so on. Or our laxed legal system in which we have criminals walking free on the streets who should be behind bars at the least, and maybe they should have been, executed, receiving capital punishment. So in a zero, what's the word I'm looking for again? I was using it. Consequence society, people think, oh, I can just get in the way of federal law enforcement. Hey, maybe I can even show a little bit of, a threat and everything be okay. That's not the world we live in, all right? If you are going to defy the federal government, you better be ready to expect the consequences that will come from it, the ramifications. It's kind of the idea behind Second Amendment, right? We know that if we're going to defy the government, we better be armed. We better be ready to deal with the ramifications and deal with the fallout. The difference is when the left defies the federal government, they're normally trying to protect criminals and actual criminals. And then when the right defies the government, it's probably because either we don't want to be forced to get the shot, or we don't want you to take away our natural rights to church or self-protection against a tyrannical government. Major distinction there. So once again, a very sad situation. You hate to see it. We'll keep track of it, how much this continues to spread across the country. Is the left going to jump on this? Because up to this point, Trump has kind of been having a decent time. Economy's been looking good. The Venezuelan kidnapping, of the president. Hey, is it all about oil? Or, hey, did this really need to happen for drug reasons? Once again, I'm just saying, let's go get Mexico. Like, that's my call, right? I mean, hey, I feel like Venezuela is like the minor player in the deal. I want Mexico. I want Marine boots propped up on the desk of the Mexican president. That's what I want. But anyways, can't always get what we want. But I think Trump's been having a good run. So the left needs something. They need something to get everybody ginned up. We're heading into the midterms. The issue is, this is early on. Remember how volatile and dynamic election seasons are? It's a very early thing for them to be latching on in February, but we'll see if they try to ride this out and if they think riots, burning down the streets and so on, is going to play into their favor. They may think that. We'll see. We have A. Hannah with us. A. Hannah, I don't know who you are. I don't recognize your handle. That doesn't mean that I haven't met you before. I just don't recognize your handle. The handles have changed up a little bit on YouTube, it seems like, to some degree. Great to have you. Ecclesiastes 8:11, King James Version, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set on them to do evil. I think the book of, I'm one of those that, you got to rightly divide, be very careful about trying to take any random verse and apply it to us today. But I would say Ecclesiastes is a book that you got to be careful. Not everything you can just directly make application or correlation with, but I do think that would be one of those. If there's not a sentence against evil work, it will continue. And so thank you for that. Good point. Now, with that in mind, can I can I switch things up a little bit here? We're going to get into Stranger Things. We're going to talk about the TV show I promised we were going to talk about earlier this week, and we didn't get around to doing it. We're going to talk about it now and why it matters. Don't tune out. I know some of you like to hear the political commentating. Maybe most of you are here for the theological commentating, or at least I hope. Maybe you're not as big of a fan of the cultural commentating, okay? But you need to listen, okay? There's a point. There's a reason behind it, both true for political matters and theological matters. But before we do that, what I want to do is I'm going to be a little bit, that's not really how I want to word this. Here's my point. Let me interrupt our broadcast to remind you of our Bible conference that we are going to be doing this spring. And I am already outlining everything that I want to cover. Okay, I'm trying, even though it's in March, I'm trying to get ahead of the game. And I've been trying to talk to Dr. White. He's been ignoring my phone calls about what a man can do about how soon do you need, excuse me, I'm sorry, that's embarrassing. Talking about Dr. White just brings all this, what's the word I'm looking for? Indigestion, I don't know. But I've been trying to reach out to him to ask him, hey, how soon would a publishing company need material to have books ready for a conference? And I just can't get him to answer my calls. So if you can get Dr. White to answer your calls, he's maybe already turned off the show at this point. But we are getting ready for the Spring Bible Conference, addressing doctrinal issues that churches avoid. And so what I'm asking is, I'm just wanting to make sure that I am covering my bases here. Even though I'm already getting an outline, what do you believe are doctrinal issues that churches avoid? I want to get your thoughts. Okay, I want to get a poll to make sure that my thoughts are in line with what you're thinking, because I think we're going to have a lot of the same overlap, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the matter. Okay. Now, getting back into our show today. So let's talk about this show called Stranger Things. You may have heard of Stranger Things. It is kind of a cultural phenomenon, I guess you could call it. It is a show on Netflix, and Netflix by no means is a good wholesome thing, but all the same, it is a streaming company people will watch. I have been known to mooch off of people who have the Netflix account and see what's all on there. And back in the day, I did watch Stranger Things, and my wife and I, watched it some. And it's one of those things, shame on me. It's not the most wholesome of shows at times when it comes to language, but it's kind of an interesting premise set in the 80s, and scary monsters and kids riding their bicycles and things like that. And what I want to do is, this show has come to a close. And this show is a big deal. As a matter of fact, on this last season, there were 5 seasons of Stranger Things, and Netflix spent $400 million. We're talking about real money, okay? $400 million on this show. And this does matter. And I think even if you will bear with me, if you will follow this through, it's even tied to this event in Minnesota. Okay? It's tied to this event in Minnesota of this woman believing that she can just obstruct law enforcement and not suffer consequences. I think a lot of this plays in together. The setting for this show is in the 80s. And it starts out in the early 80s, 82. Reagan's in office. And it's in Indiana. And, Reagan won almost every state his second time around for sure. But I imagine he won Indiana the first time around as well. Indiana is known as a red state. And what you find to be very interesting is one of the observations you make about Stranger Things is, first of all, there are no positive male role models in the show. Not a single positive male role model. There is a chief of police who is a divorced drunk, and he has all sorts of problems. The first season, he's a little bit more tolerable, though the later seasons, he just really becomes completely useless. So, one main character, a divorced drunk. Another male character, an adult, is the divorced father of another family, of a wife. It is really the single mother who is kind of the more, I don't know, I guess you could say most level-headed to a large degree. There is a married couple in the show. They're only, shown every now and then. They're the parents of one of the main characters. And the father is completely oblivious to everything going on. He has no idea that these kids are having to deal with monsters and everything else, and he is mostly just seen sleeping in his chair, complaining about there not being any more bacon, something like that. And even then, he's almost kind of lovable in some ways. But there are no positive male role models in the entire show. Another aspect of the show is the pro-socialist sentiments, not seen as much in the early seasons, but becomes more so in the latter seasons. This, hey, capitalism's bad, the American government is bad, which some aspects I can get along with, but their critiques of the American government is not the same as my critiques of the American government. And this is once again in Indiana in the days of Reagan, which really should be a whole bunch of conservative, red-blooded Americans. Another interesting thing, the 80s, Indiana, no Christians, except for the townspeople who are oblivious to everything and just say, hey, everything, Satan's the one that's doing this, and they don't believe there's monsters, and all the main characters are not at all Christian in any way. They have no sense of faith whatsoever. And then there is the very interesting observation, once again, this is Indiana in the 80s. Two of the, there's probably 8 or 9 main characters. 2 of the main characters, as the show progresses, turns out to be of the LGBTQ identity. This is so amusing to me because there is not a Hollywood writer, from what I can tell, who has any idea what American culture is outside of California, Southern California. And that is why modern movies and entertainment is just all garbage. There are no Rocky Balboas anymore. There are no Indiana Joneses anymore. There's nothing like that. No classic American heroes, American exceptionalism, American values. Even Independence Day, right? Americans coming together and fighting the aliens, right? You don't even have that. It is, hey, 1980s Indiana, red state, Ronald Reagan in charge. It's just a bunch of Southern California liberals living in Indiana. And one of the fascinating things is there's a character in it who is like a 120-pound girl, maybe 120 pounds. She's probably not even 120 pounds. And she is the, how do I even describe her? She's Rambo, basically. She's shooting machine guns, taking down multiple soldiers at a time because, the military government's involved as well. And so they've got to fight the monsters, but also the government. And then there are the monsters. And the monsters, and this is how it all plays in. I need you to stay with me. Do not get lost here. The monsters cannot be hurt with guns. You can shoot them repeatedly with a rifle, and it does nothing. But there is a scene, I kid you not, the mother, one of the mothers in the show, she has a monster who is trying to get them, right? She takes her wine bottle and breaks the bottle, and this monster, who is immune to bullets, immune to gunfire, takes down dozens of soldiers without any issue at all. This mother, with her broken wine glass, fights off the monster for a good while. She is able to take her broken wine glass and just stab the monster, doing more damage to it. The monster actually starts bleeding, whereas a dozen soldiers with M16s couldn't even make a scratch. Remember that culture of no consequences and, hey, girl, you just go do whatever you want to do. They can't stop you mentality. This is what modern Hollywood is writing. This is what modern Hollywood is showing. Remember that awful movie? I don't know if you saw it. We didn't really talk about it a whole lot, but One Battle After Another, Leonardo DiCaprio, what have you. And the whole thing was about basically left-wing activist terrorists attacking ICE facilities. Yeah, that was not really timed well because there actually have been leftist terrorists attacking ICE facilities. You can just do this, and there are no consequences. And these people are shocked. These women are shocked when they actually have to face a consequence for engaging in the obstruction of federal agents and then not having the wherewithal to think, hey, if I drive my vehicle towards them, they may perceive that as a threat. And they may feel the need to protect their life. So I say all that, I address this show because the sad thing is, it started out as an interesting premise, and maybe if there were no other seasons after season 1, you had a kind of a nice little monster movie, which I know some of you may not be really fans of that, but set in the 80s, kind of a cool thing, right? Kids on bicycles, riding and trying to find their friend that went missing and you know, the mystery of it all. But our stories are, how can I put it this nicely? Absolutely stupid. They're absolutely stupid. It's a shame that our culture does not have good stories anymore. Stories of valor, stories of morality, stories grounded in realism. We don't have it. They don't exist anymore. We instead have a bunch of Hollywood liberals writing themselves into all of these stories that are supposed to be taking place back in the days of the 80s and even before that. One of the most hilarious things is that one of the keys to defeating the villain in the show is one of the characters is scared because he is gay. And so in order to overcome his fear to where he can beat the monster, he's got to tell all of his friends that he is gay. This is what Hollywood thinks. If you just accept yourself, and once again, the correlation there, this woman who lost her life, she was killed in a, once again, every bit of evidence shows justified shooting. She was of that LGBTQ mentality, that group. We have completely detached ourselves from reality. That's why you have Zoran Mondani promoting this idea of the warmth of collectivism, and we need to reject American ideology of owning private property, and there are no consequences. We can just have government-run grocery stores and rent control, and we will never face any ramifications because everything they see, the propaganda on the news, the TV shows they watch, there are no real world consequences, okay? It doesn't matter, right? If you are a 120-pound woman, you can beat up 5 200-pound men because you are just inherently so special and powerful. We need a reality check. I think Christianity needs a reality check. Christianity is wrapped up in their mysticism. They are wrapped up in in their feelings and emotions, and they're letting that dictate their doctrine instead of looking at reality. First of all, start with the Bible. What does the Bible say? Second of all, make a simple observation. Do you look around and see a kingdom that is here now? Do you look around and see Christians being filled with the Holy Spirit, keeping the ordinances of God as is described and defined in the New Covenant? Or are you seeing a lot of stuff made up in which we say, well, a Christian's going to, be good for the most part, maybe, they'll be a little bit better than 50-50. It's all made up, right? Because they're basing it off of their feelings, off of their emotions, off of their own media, right? How much Christian media out there, whether it's music or it's movies, it's TV shows, what have you, Christian content is giving them a skewed view of the Bible, giving them a skewed view of the world. Be very careful about what you're putting in front of your face, because once again, while you may think it's a little bit silly to be talking about a TV show on Netflix, the messaging behind it, the sentiments behind it, I think are being reflected in the real world. People are oblivious to reality. They do not think there's any consequences. They think they can just do whatever they want because they believe themselves to be in the right, and they just, are different, and rules don't apply to them. So, very sad thing, something to keep in mind. What is not sad, though, is I see this comment here from Christy Caswell. She says, my husband, who is John Tom, and I just booked our room and look forward to your conference in March. I am so excited to hear that. Thank you so much, Christy, for wanting to come to our conference. If you have any questions along the way, please, please, please let me know. I think it's going to be hopefully a good time. It'll certainly be a good time of fellowship, and I will certainly do my best to make sure that the sessions and the content, the information covered will be valuable and edifying to you. So thank you. That's got me excited. I'm fired up now, and I need to make sure my friends from Tulsa will be there as well. That way we can have a number of people from all over Oklahoma coming to join us. Paul says, got to get the message in there somehow. Yeah, talking about Netflix's Stranger Things, and so many things are all about inserting that message, the liberal worldview. Randy makes a recommendation, 1958, The Queen of Outer Space, Better Time Spent. I have never seen The Queen of Outer Space. Let's see here. 1958. I'm assuming there was a remake which wasn't as good. The Queen of Outer Space. Is this something worth watching? I need to be educated, cultured a little bit. Interesting. Maybe does my wife and I need to add this to our watch? I mean, it's from 1958. I mean, surely it's going to be relatively family friendly. I mean, even back in 1958, the roughest of movies were still pretty tame, all things considered. So, space sci-fi adventure. American astronauts are drawn by a mysterious force to the planet Venus, which they find to be inhabited only by beautiful women and their despotic queen. Interesting. Well, there you go. The Queen of Outer Space. Thank you. Thank you, Old Man Bob, for that recommendation. All right, everyone. Now that we have covered some matters of politics, some matters of culture, let's get into some matters of theology. How does that sound? So here we go. Jumping right in, Robert asked the question, where do you stand on the Genesis gap? It seems to me that the fall of Lucifer must have occurred sometime in eternity past, before the week of creation. So let's go ahead and go to Genesis 1:1. I will read the verse. I know you all know it very well, but I'll read it anyways. And then we'll discuss what he means by the Genesis gap. Probably most of you good Bible students have already heard of this, but I'll define it for those who may not be super familiar. It says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now, your question, or the question concerns the gap. Where is the gap? The gap, at least proposed, possibly, lies here, okay, between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. It is in part because of how Genesis reads, both in the King James, but also when you kind of dig into the Hebrew a little bit. And then it is given some more weight when you read 2 Peter, I believe it's 2 Peter chapter 3. Could be 1 Peter chapter 3. I always forget. But it's this matter here. One of the things, if our tool is working here, Nathan, yeah. And the earth, okay? The earth was, hayah, okay? You'll notice, I'm going to zoom in there, was can be taken as to become, all right? It happened. It became without form, okay? As a matter of fact, if we click on that number, let me get rid of this, and we just click on was, and we see the times that it appears. Let's see here in Genesis. Let's just go to chapter 19, verse 1. Okay, shall be, okay? Shall be, it's a word that can be taken that way. Let's go to chapter 4, verse 1. And it shall come to pass, right? So there's kind of that sentiment of the earth, it came to pass to be without form. 34:1 shall be. 41:1 thou shalt be over my house. 13 had been, let there be no strife. So it's not necessarily just a hard and fast was in every single context there. Let's go beyond Genesis. Let's look at Exodus. Now Moses kept the flock. God said unto Moses, I am that I am. 5:1, and when there was straw. Let's look at just a few more. Let's go to Judges. Judges 12:1. And my people were at great strife. 14:1. Their feast lasted. And it was so. So the point is, the way this argument works is, hey, you probably read it that the earth was without form and void. But why was it without form and void? Did God just create it without form and void? Because verse 1 says God created the heaven and the earth. Now, you could argue that is that's a prepositional statement. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. It starts out in the beginning, and then so of course when the earth is first created, it is form and void, and then God starts giving form to it. But the argument is, well, maybe the earth was without form and void because there was something that happened to it. And we do know that there is the serpent, and the fall of Satan, his disobedience, his rebellion against God is not recorded anywhere in chapter 1 specifically. And so really the only natural place that it could fall is, hey, you've got the earth, it's created, but then it was without form. Something happened, right? It was corrupted, creation was corrupted. Then you combine that with 1 Peter, is it chapter 3? 1 Peter chapter 3. Maybe it is 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2. And if not, it's chapter 3. It is chapter 2. I believe. Give me just a moment. I'm going to find it. And maybe it is chapter 3, and I am wrong. Here it is. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. Now that does sound like the flood, and it certainly could be the flood. And if I was to just land on a particular position today to kind of get really straight to Robert's question, I probably would lean towards the flood. But you do have verse 7. But the heavens and the earth which are now by the same word are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. And so you have this reference that even the heavens that are now. Now some argue that the firmament of waters was over the earth prior to the flood, and then the waters came down from the firmament, and that was how the flood came upon the earth. So you can argue, well, that's how the heavens changed, because before the space above the earth was the firmament of water, and now the heavens are different, right? That the majority of that water is now below us, and what's remaining is, the water cycle, clouds, what have you. But there is the argument to be made that no, that was the world before Genesis 1:2. In which there was the beginning when God created the heaven and the earth, and then the earth after Satan's rebellion, because we know Satan's rebellion happened at some point, darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And that's why the earth was without form and void. So there is a good case, a good argument to be made, that you've got both Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, the earth was without form, leaves room to say that this is what happened. The earth became this. And then you have 2 Peter. I am someone who is willing to entertain the gap theory. There are some people who have no desire at all to discuss it. And the main reason being is there is the possibility that, well, if God created creatures, made animals, made fish, I don't know that he made man, maybe. But regardless, there were beings that existed before. Satan rebels, God destroys the earth due to corruption. When you get to the end of Genesis chapter 1, here at the very bottom, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good, and the evening and the morning were the sixth day. There is the struggle. God looks at it and says it's very good, and yet we've had all this rebellion, and God had to destroy the earth, and so there's all these creatures that have been destroyed, and they perished. They struggle with that idea, that there was death and destruction before the fall. I understand, and that's sometimes, it kind of compels me. And I will say, if you reject the gap theory, you are married. I don't feel like there's really another way around it. You are married to a young earth. So, 6,000 years, around there, which I'm willing to say. I don't care what I get called. I don't care if I get made fun of or be called a science denier or anything else. I don't care what carbon dating says. Carbon dating's proven to be flawed in a number of cases, or other kinds of dating metrics using isotopes. So I'm willing to be in the camp of a young Earth, okay, 6,000 years old. With that in mind, though, the gap theory, like Bullinger held to the gap theory. When you do find the remains of creatures, and you find evidence, or what is perceived to be evidence, of an earth that is very, very old, it is because those are the leftovers of the earth that was. I've always said this. If you are someone who is compelled by scientific current thinking, okay, I didn't say necessarily evidence, but I said scientific thinking. If you are compelled by those who utilize radiometric dating, carbon dating, as well as, I forget the other isotopes that are sometimes used, and you think, yeah, I feel like the Earth is millions of years old. Look at these fossils. I mean, look, I went to the lake the other day and I found a fossil of a fish. And I mean, that's just evidence that fossil's got to be millions of years old or hundreds of thousands of years old, right? If you're just really convinced, okay? Rather than you allegorizing the Bible. And that's one reason why I'm a real stickler for Genesis 1. I think it sets the tone. If you take Genesis 1 and you allegorize it, then you're going to allegorize everything else. You're going to allegorize the kingdom prophecies in the Old Testament. You're going to allegorize the New Covenant. You're going to allegorize the teachings of Jesus. And you're going to allegorize Paul, and you're going to mix it all together, shake and bake, and get yourself modern Christianity that just doesn't really take a strong position on the Bible, but just kind of is willing to rob from, Jesus at times to pay Paul, and rob from Paul sometimes to pay Jesus. And it's a problem, right? It's a problem. And when I say Jesus, I'm talking about Jesus' earthly ministry. Maybe it's a better comparison of Paul and Peter, but my point is, when you read the Gospels, Jesus is speaking to the Jews regarding the kingdom message. And so they're willing to take from Jesus a little bit in the Gospels to give to Paul and what have you, and vice versa, to make it all mesh, right? And hey, we're going to reconcile Paul and James. Just because Paul says you're justified by faith and not by works, and James says you're justified by faith and works, it all means the same thing. It's just two sides of the same coin. Why do they do that? I think they do that because they start in Genesis 1 and they're already willing to sacrifice a strong take on the Bible and do some allegory, right? So I would just tell you, if you're someone that I'm not willing to argue with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I went to college and I was indoctrinated that these rocks are billions of years old. By golly, they're billions of years old. Then the gap theory I would recommend over ancient Near Eastern mytho-history, the A&E. And one of these days I'm going to do a study on the A&E and give you my thoughts on it. Right now I'm not convinced by it because it's not in the Bible, so I don't feel like it has a compelling case. That's my take on the gap theory. I have no problem. If you are a gap theorist, come sit at the table, right? Just like the Acts 9 people, okay? If you don't believe that Paul ever had a ministry for the kingdom, if you don't think that Paul ever spoke to matters of the kingdom message, and if you don't think there was any overlap, you recognize so much, and you have so much right. Come sit down. Let us fellowship together. If you're a gap theory person, come sit down. Let us fellowship together. I'm willing to have the conversation. If you are someone who is very anti-gap theory and say, no, there's no gap theory, I would recommend look at it again. Look at the scriptures. We're not bowing the knee to what the talking heads at Harvard say, okay? The gap theory, we do not argue it because of what the professors say. If you're going to hold to the gap theory, do it because you're compelled by what the scriptures say. Paul says, what is the gap theory? I've heard of it, but never got into it. Hopefully I described it decently well just then, but maybe I kind of brushed over it. The basic idea here is, Paul, I'm just going to put it in very plain wording, is that the gap theory is there is literally a gap between verse 1 and verse 2. So in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. This earth had form. This earth had life. And then between verse 1 and verse 2, Satan rebelled. And when Satan rebelled, this led to the earth becoming without form. It became void. And then God had to create a second earth, okay? Not really that he'd create a second earth, but he had to recreate the earth, and that's when you get into our age. And so there's that idea of the gap. And how long was that gap? We have no idea. So it is a theory based upon Scripture, but some like it because it aligns with the current thoughts of modern science. And so I'm willing to entertain it. It's not one that I think is a fellowship breaker. And there may be a day when I call myself a gap theorist. I don't know, potentially. If I do, if Mark Baze ever becomes one who holds to the gap theory, it will be because the Scripture compelled me, not because, Professor so-and-so at whatever school says so. Because the truth is, those professors probably all believe that a boy can become a girl. Let's see. Randy says 18th century early ideas that influence this theory can be traced to Scottish theologian Thomas Chalmers, is that how you would say that? Who popularized a version of it to reconcile biblical account with geological. So, with that, maybe the gap theory was born out of a desire to reconcile the Bible's account with the observation of science. I will say, I would be willing to at least say, good on a theologian who adopts a gap theory. I would much rather hold to a theologian who adopts a gap theory as opposed to a theologian who adopts an allegorical view, because they're still going to defend biblical literalism. Okay, even though if they're doing it purely because science says so, I think that's a flawed assumption, because what is science? Science is always changing. Science, I promise you, in 100 years, there's going to be a different opinion on the age of the earth. There's going to be a different opinion or theory on evolution. All of those things, which evolution is such an intellectually bankrupt ideology. It's laughable. It is laughable that anybody teaches it. It's absurd. It's silly. Okay? Good on everybody who calls it out for what it is. A bunch of hogwash nonsense. So, it's... But as a matter of fact, let me say this, and probably Robert's already watched this, because Robert just watches all of my stuff. I'm going to have to leave the Queens of Outer Space, or Queen of Outer Space, for a moment. And if you go over to my playlist on the YouTube channel, you are going to find here the integrity of Scripture from creation to flood, and textual evidence for a 6-day creation. And I believe, I'm going to mute this, over the course of this series, or this study, as I teach through this. I was sick that day. I was not feeling well, but I powered through it. I forgot about that. But yeah, now I'm watching and I realized, I felt terrible. But I do think towards the very end, at some point here, I think in this session, I spoke to the gap theory. At least I thought I did. But maybe it's another session that I... Dinosaurs in the Bible, I don't know if I got into the gap theory here on that one. I'd imagine I probably got into the gap theory somewhere in here, in this study. And I cannot recall. But regardless, somewhere, if you watch that whole series, that was a Bible conference I did at another church. Just a short 3-session one. Each session was about a little less than an hour. I did that a little over a year ago now. I spoke to that. Paul says there's a lot of things God's been doing that we don't know about. One thing I'm curious is if he does or has life on any other planets and deals with them completely separate and in a different way. My take is no. I don't think so. I do not think so. But who knows? There is the theory that if there was life somewhere else, they wouldn't be fallen. Earth is where Satan has been cast down, or at least he has access to. And so if there are any other beings out there, they're maybe more angelic or demonic than how we are. Something interesting to consider there. He mentions this topic reminds me of Kent Hovind, or Hovind. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. I do not know who he is. But Hannah, who I'm still not sure who that is, but it's great to have you. I'm sorry that I don't recognize your handle if you have been with us before. You say Kent was a young earth creationist, therefore he adamantly opposes a possibility of a gap. Yeah, and I would call myself a young earth creationist, right? I'm just a young earth creationist who is willing to have, dinner with a gap theorist. David says, problem with gap theory, no death until Adam, Romans 5:12. That's certainly, another case that you can point to, the matter of, hey, you would have death prior to the fall. And so, wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. I would be willing to put that in the bag of support for a young earth and to reject the gap theory. Once again, then at the same time, if I wanted to be contrarian, we're speaking in matters of the earth that now is, because you do have that statement from 2 Peter chapter 3, the earth that now is. So I'm not telling you that I disagree with you, David, on that. Okay, don't take it as me saying that you're wrong on that. I would point to Romans 5:12 as support for a young earth creation, because that's when death entered into the world. But if I'm trying to be I don't know about being a devil's advocate during Bible study, but being a contrarian, okay, that's what I would maybe respond with if I was trying to argue the other side. I took ethics in college, and so I know how to debate a little bit. Paul says he was recently on a podcast with George Janko. Well, interesting. Hopefully our podcast is better. I guess it is a podcast. I fought this for a long time because there's the stereotype of every young white guy having a podcast, but this is what it is, and I'm just going to accept it now. And then Hannah, once again, says, like I heard someone say about young earth creation, it is like dating my house by how old I am. I think I follow that analogy. It is interesting. The assumptions behind radiometric dating are big, right? The ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12, the ratio of these other isotopes, the rate of radioactive decay is the same as it's always been. And so with that in mind, I have a lot of questions. And I'm willing to just be contrarian and say, I don't care what the geologists have to say. Go find oil. Use your geology degree to go find oil, and then I'll care what you have to say. And if you find oil where I live, all the better. Okay, everyone, we're an hour and 4 minutes in. I've got to go put a battery in a piece of equipment, and then I will hopefully try to get to some Sunday school. Fear tactics. Deceived. Has Christianity become a cult? Thank you all for supporting our ministry. This is what I do. I am a pastor, I'm a Bible teacher, and this is what I devote most of my time to. And so if you feel that this ministry is worth your time and investment, you'd like to see the ministry continue on, if you want to have the daily show, weekly show, it happens several times a week, right? If you want to continue to see that happen, then please, if you would consider the possibility of supporting our ministry. You reap what you sow, as Scripture says, not that God will bless you by giving you my ministry, but if you want to have right division content, if you want to have right division Bible teachers, then invest. give us the resources we need and the means we need to keep going. I would always appreciate it. I'm done speaking of those matters. What really does matter is your dedication to theology, your willingness to boldly defend the faith. And thank you so much. If you have any questions about the Bible Conference, send me an email. I would be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have. If you have theology questions, you can always submit those to me and send those. You find us on Facebook. Mark Baze is my Facebook page. You can find me there. So thank you all so much for joining us for today's show. We will see all of you on Sunday.